and welcome back. Today we're going to continue with the Alice in Wonderland 2.0 series. First we did Alice. You could definitely check that video down below. But now we're going to do the Mad Hatter. Do a creepy twist on it, of course. Maybe he spilled some tea. It made his face a little messy and uncovers what's really going on with the Mad Hatter. I should probably say a warning before I start this video that we're going to talk about dark, grim fairy tales and disturbing topics that are a little horrifying and spooky, but interesting. I cannot wait, so let's get started. Also, I thought we would talk about real life fairy tales, folk tales that happen to have a real history behind it. And I'm gonna go deep dive into some of Disney's horrific stories on what it actually means. I didn't know that Cinderella was a real life story, so we're gonna talk about stuff like that. So excited, let's do this. And yes, I'm just wearing my jacket, my little Mad Hatter jacket without a shirt on because we're gonna paint something here, hopefully. Let's start off with a good base. I'm gonna use my favorite white base. This is the Makeup Forever Color White Universal White Base. I have a feeling this is just what's in their Flash palette, but in a bigger form. Let me put on some primer first to really get this thing going. And let's talk about Cinderella. Cinderella, we all know her as the orphaned girl who has a stepmother and even worse stepsisters. And I found a little bit of information on that. It was kind of real. What? It blew my mind when I heard about this. We all know that she had a glass slipper, whimsical animals made her outfit. It was my dreams come true. We all know at the stroke of midnight she has to find her Prince Charming again and she'll live happily ever after. Although the real story was made by the Brothers Grimm and is a lot more horrific. But the Brothers Grimm I've always been a fan of because, you know, it's twisted, it's sick. It's like if what really inspired me was Brothers Grimm tales and Aesop's tales and definitely Tim Burton to start my channel personally. But in the Brothers Grimm story, there's no stroke of midnight, there's no mice, there's no bippity boppity boo. It gets creepier. So in the real story, Cinderella is not her real name. We don't really know her real name. Jane Doe, who are you? The story starts off with her mother dying. What? Did she get Rona? No. But her mother's last words were for her to be kind and good. And that's where the story starts out. And it's so sad because this girl who plays who is the Cinderella, she goes and spends time at her mother's grave as much as she wants. But just a year after her mother passes away, her father remarries to a woman who has 2 daughters. And it's I don't understand how this father does not look after Cinderella, who doesn't check in on her and notices that she's being mistreated by the stepmother and her stepsisters. But what kind of father was she? No wonder she misses her mother so much, because it kind of sounds like her mother just was the only one that cared. Of course she misses her mother. Of course she's gonna have heartbreak, and to the point where she's gonna go to the grave every day and be like, Mom, hey, miss you, father's being a dickbag. Her new mom and new sisters make her toss all her clothing away. She has to wear these raggedy clothes that are made out of scrap clothing, and they make her wooden shoes. So it's come on now. They're in it to really make her life the worst. She almost feels cursed, it seems like. And again, how would your father not know this? Where is he? Where's the father figure? And they were the one that put her in these scraggly clothes and teased her about it. They even had torturous games that was really demeaning, where her favorite game to play with her was that they would put lentil beans into the fireplace and make her pick it out of the ashes for fun, for entertainment for them. They were watching HGTV, but it was horrific. Again, where's the dad? How does he not notice that his daughter's wearing wooden shoes and scraps for clothing and picking things out of fireplaces? Who really controls him? His new wife? What? They made her clean out and sort out the good and the bad lentils on top of that. They wouldn't even let her sit in the same room as them for too long. It's what kind of child call it torturous thing is this? But with these activities of her getting the lentils and sorting them out, it would cause her to be covered in ash from the fireplace, so which hence Cinderella. That's where that came from, unfortunately. I'm trying to chisel out these cheekbones. As you can tell which Mad Hatter we're doing. When her story goes on, her father goes on a journey and asks the girls what they would like for him to bring them. And of course the the bratty little stepsisters are like, oh, we want the finest jewelry and clothes. And then Cinderella, being her humble, tortured soul, beautiful self, says, I just want you to bring back the first twig, the first thing that I could replant at my mother's grave. What a sweet, innocent soul. Like, what, ma'am? What? Like, how is the dad not, is it not clicking? And this is the point where I'm wondering where Cinderella gets these magical ideas and powers, because she had this idea if her father brought back this whatever twig seed thing that she was going to plant at her mother's grave, what she was going to do with that is she's not only going to plant at the mother's grave, but she was also going to water it, feed it with her own tears from her own sweet tortured soul. So hopefully the magical powers will come to in fruition and help her out in some way. Like, this girl was desperate, beyond desperate. Her father wasn't helping her. She was getting tortured, playing these horrendous games. They shouldn't even be considered games with her stepsisters. This Mad Hatter is gonna look like he's been losing sleep. And this is the time when the ball is finally announced, when the prince announces that he's looking for a new bride. That's gonna be a 3-day affair. Everyone in town's invited. I'm using these color drain shadows, which are bomb.com. Cinderella pleads from her mother, her whole family, if she could go, and the stepsisters were like, no ma'am. They were like scorning her for even thinking of such a thing. Like, huh, who would want to go with you to the ball? So her stepmother goes even further, and then once Cinderella has this bright idea to go to the ball, the stepmother throws more lentils in the ashes and plays that horrific game. I am never gonna look at lentils the same way again. They're already like the fart bean that I saw them as, that I can never get them to taste good and they take forever to cook, but now it's like whole nother level. And she not only dumps one plateful of lentils this time, but it's two platefuls. Like, this stepmother, if I could just kick someone. But it seems like Cinderella somehow notices that birds start to help her when the lentils are dumped in the ashes this time, which is that her mother secretly, you know, helping her out. Did she get that twig, whatever, to plant at her mother's grave? I need to know this, and I can't figure it out with the articles I've been reading online. But I'm very invested at this point into the story. I don't know if you are. Let's do a little highlight. I feel like the Mad Hatter would have some highlight. I don't know why. We need to contour the nose. Yeah, that needs to happen. So when the stepmother and the sisters, those evil, I'm not gonna say, go to the ball without Cinderella, Cinderella goes to her little tree that I'm sure she planted at her mother's grave, and she begs her mother for a dress and for help in this time. Because, you know, she just wants to feel normal. She just wants to go to the ball like everyone else does. And believe it or not, the dress magically appears and is falling from that tree from her mother's grave. And she puts this beautiful dress on and goes to the ball and meets the prince, which makes me happy. And this, my friends, is where the story, the plot thickens, because not only does she flee the party like she does in the original Disney run fantasy that we know, but she flees and comes back for 3 consecutive days after to the prince's like humble abode. Not only does she come, but she shows up with an even prettier dress each time, stunting, showing out. It's almost like she had friends looking out for her. I think her mother was looking out for her because she was sending her more dresses from the beautiful, you know, little tree situation, her little spell she casted. Maybe she's a witch, which I don't mind. But every time she shows up to the prince and does this, the third and final night she sees him with the beautiful dress, she loses her slipper, and it isn't glass, it's golden. And this starts the infamous hunt for the prince hunting for his princess. So it wasn't a glass slipper this time, it was a golden slipper. I'm just using a liquid catsuit by Wet n Wild in Taffy Tantrum. Fitting for the Mad Hatter, I feel like. It's like this beautiful bubblegum pink lipstick. And we want it a little smeared. Because like I said, we want it to look like it's melting. And here, my friends, is where this story gets horrific. Because when the prince, we all know, goes out of his way to track down his princess or his future queen, he goes to every house in town to look for this mysterious girl he's been seeing. And he goes to Cinderella's house, but of course she is trapped in the back room. And the stepsisters get to try on that golden slipper first because they're evil and crazy and obnoxious. So what do these girls do? Of course, when the shoe, well, obviously does not fit them because it's not their freaking shoe. You know what the evil stepmother tells the stepsisters to do? For one of them, if they have the guts to chop their toes off. This is where it gets crazy. Should have warned you ahead of time. But yeah, just chop your toes off. You know why? Because whoever becomes in love with this prince and he chooses is going to be the future queen of the town. And when you're queen, you don't have to walk anyway. That was her explanation. And the best part is one of these stepsisters does it, fits into the shoe, and the prince just like goes along with it and buys it with this bloody shoe probably in his hands. Like, if Sweeney Todd was a Cinderella, it's just all types of messed up, you know? So as they're riding off with her bloody shoe, the bird that helps Cinderella, like I said in the beginning of the story, with her little hunt game that her evil stepsisters and mother would play on her, points out the blood pouring from this shoe to the prince. So at least they kept on theme in this, that there's magical animals that help out, because that's one of my favorite parts of any type of Disney princess fairy tale. I just want animals to talk to me or sing to me, or I sing and they help me out. Singing, I could sing and they could help me out. That's all I want. So the prince notices this, turns around, goes back to the house to drop her greedy, weird, you know what, off at the house. And the second sister tries on the shoe for a second attempt. The stepsister, not Cinderella, unfortunately. Sister number 2 pretty much does the same thing as sister number 1, but since he noticed the toes, instead of the toes being chopped off, she chops off her heel. What type of X-Files making a murder is this? You know? Where do they get these ideas from? Do they study were there serial killers in ye old times? Do they study that? I'm just baffled and confuzzled and confused. Like, what? I have questions. And again, when they leave the house with the prince, of course her feet are bleeding on the way to the castle. The bird again points out to the prince, "Sir, look at her feet. This one's bleeding too. She's a bleeder." Takes her back. Then Cinderella gets to try on the slipper. Somehow she gets to try it on when he gets back to their house. Magic in itself. I'm just putting some white like mascara because I feel like it just makes the look better. It's almost like bird droppings from Cinderella on my eyelashes. Back to the story. When Cinderella tries on the shoes, of course it fits, and of course he whisks her away to the castle and they get married. Marriage. I'm making like this look like it's dripping down my neck, like melting. I'm gonna pretend like tea spilled, not like drama, but actual tea spilled. The best part of this story is that those little birds that were helping Cinderella out, that were probably sent from her mother's grave, which I love this idea. I really wanna hope that she's like this beautiful, like Cinderella's secretly a beautiful, enchanted like witch, and her mother was like trying to curse the stepsisters and help her out. Because the favorite part of this whole story is that those birds that were helping her out with the shoe business, pointing out the bloody shoes to the prince for Cinderella to be saved. At the wedding day of Cinderella and the prince, they poke out the eyes of the evil stepsisters for trying to pull off all that. And that just made me happy. I know it shouldn't, but karma exists. I believe it. Now that was the story of Cinderella. We could stop there, but there's more. I found out, let me just go on. I don't know how long this is gonna take for me to talk about, but I found out that Hansel, is it Hansel or Hansel? And Gretel, let's say Hansel, is that right? And Gretel was based off true stories too in history. So somewhere in Europe in 1314, there was like a lot of stuff going down. Famine struck a lot of homes and families in towns, and you know, they had no food to survive. So some of them would not be able to afford to feed their children, abandon their kids, unfortunately. And the worst part of it is they would even sacrifice their own children and eat them. I know, it's rough. And a lot of scholars believe that these tragedies that happened in Europe started the story of Hansel and Gretel. And since it was talked about, Hansel and Gretel and the Brothers Grimm, it has been told in 160 different languages. It is a ye olde folk tale. I know it's one of my favorites. There's this, like, I think it was in the 80s or 70s, this one Hansel and Gretel movie that was terrifying that I'll always watch and remember. It was so good. But this story is going to feature cannibalism, child abandonment, stuff like that. Warning. And maybe some enslavement and murder. But if you don't know about this story of the original Hansel and Gretel, basically it's two children who go out into the forest when their parents are about to be starving. And the kids, like, I think that this was the one with the breadcrumbs, wasn't it? Some of the stories I think depicted breadcrumbs for them to use, but if they're starving, how'd they get breadcrumbs? To find their way back home, but that doesn't work. Maybe I'm thinking of something else. I could be wrong. Oh, it wasn't breadcrumbs. I knew it wasn't breadcrumbs. It was stones that they left behind so that they could find their way back home. What smart children. Either that or their parents were taught them well, or both. It could be both. But the mother or stepmother in this tale convinces the father, what's up with these evil stepmothers, to abandon the children again when they go out, like when they send them out for food. What's with these mothers in these stories, man? It is. Okay, so I was right. The story takes a turn. It was breadcrumbs one of the second times when the mother decides to play this game again. And the breadcrumbs, I don't know where they get it from if they're starving, first of all, but the breadcrumbs are eaten by the birds of the forest, so they can't find their way back home and they get lost. And the starving children come across a gingerbread house in the middle of the forest, which should be sus in the first place, but they decide to eat the gingerbread house. I do not eat strangers' food. This is one of the lessons I learned when I was a kid. One of the many tales I remember to not do this. And this is when they find out, because they didn't realize at first, that inside this gingerbread house there's an orc or an old hag witch. I always knew it as an old witch, but it depends on what story you hear. And they enslave the children and overfeed them till they get fat and plump and juicy. Because the plan was for them to get fat, for the witch to eat the children and boil them up and gobble them up. Or org, depending on the story, right? Right. But the pair manages to escape when the girl, there was a boy and a girl, the girl shoves the witch into the oven and they manage to escape. Yes. Swiper no swipey. Out of stranger danger zone. And it's presumed that they live happily ever after, but the true tale is much darker, of course. But the true story of Hansel and Gretel was in the Baltic region in 1314 to 1322. This is when the elderly volunteered to starve to death, sadly, so that the children and everyone else could live. A lot of children were abandoned, and that there was evidence of mothers and cannibalism and some sad stuff. Mothers abandoning children and cannibalism happening, because if the old people volunteered to die and they're starving, well, you might know what may have happened. It was known that people during these famine times were so starving, so hungry, that they would extract bodies from cemeteries to eat upon the fresher bodies in cemeteries. I know, it's getting graphic. And that women would eat their children out of sheer hunger to provide for the family as well. And this is what also inspired Hansel and Gretel, because Hansel and Gretel were known that the parents kind of abandoned them so that they would be able to go out and look into the forest for food, but the parents were really abandoning them, and then they found that witch and they were just in more trouble. There was an Italian folklore where a stepmother convinced the father to abandon their children and make them get lost in the forest using oats, well, to lure them back home, but they really abandoned them, almost like a game. But then a donkey ate the oats. Just all types of messed up. What's with, I'm kidding, I'm not kidding, what's with the evil stepmothers? This would make me fearful. Why does Disney make us afraid of stepmothers? Why do these stories make us afraid of stepmothers? Are stepmothers really that cruel? Maybe I shouldn't ask that. I'm just adding some fake gold and rust to the clockwork and cogs and stuff. You know, fake little rusty bits. All right, I'm gonna put some fake clocks on. And then I'm gonna put some white paint dripping onto, he spilled the tea onto the clocks as well. And I'm even gonna show some of the skin underneath. Ooh, I need the center. Oh, my teeth look so yellow with all the white. I need the tooth gap. So I'm gonna get some black tooth lacquer paint and go like this. So I'm gonna put some blood right here. Right here. Kind of like a psycho coming from down his hat. There we go. The thing that scared me the most though out of the grim tale of Hansel and Gretel was the story I heard about. There was one where, this gets graphic, the children have to follow home a trail of ashes, and when they get home, this is a Romanian story, the stepmother kills the little boy and then makes the sister prepare the boy's body to eat his corpse for their family meal. Yeah, that's what's with the stepmothers. Now let's put in some contact lenses. That was the creepiest one, that Romanian story. Whew. Dark times, man. There was one where the girl like hid the boy's heart in a tree or something, and then she refused to participate in the family meal in one story. I'm putting in contact lenses right now from Pinky Paradise, where the sister cooked the boy and then like there was a cuckoo bird that ratted her out in one story. These are my favorite yellow lenses. I use these for The Witcher. Again, they're from Pinky Paradise. They're kind of go wonky on me, but it's kind of good because, I mean, who's the wonkiest character in town? The Mad Hatter. All right, where's my hat? Let's really put this together. And that completes my makeup look. I hope you guys enjoyed these really creepy tales. I know that they're really dark and scary, but I just wanted to show you that there is always history to learn behind the fairy tales and stuff that we were told as kids. Sometimes they're not true, or sometimes they are darkly, definitely true, and definitely creepy. Subscribe to this channel. I do 2 videos a week, every Monday and Friday. Every Friday we're gonna keep doing more Twisted Alice in Wonderland makeups. If you guys like it, hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching. All the products I use in this video will be listed down below in the description box as always. Cheers to you. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.